Good afternoon. Welcome to today's special episode of See You at 4. My name is Shreya Soni and I'm the founder and CEO of DSSE. DSSE is an experiential marketing, events and communications agency. In our 7 years of operation, we've had the great pleasure of working with close to 200 homegrown and international brands to get their story across to the right audience in a more nuanced and sticky fashion. See You at 4 is an interview series where we speak with thought leaders, with experts, industry experts, and people who really know their trade well. The idea is to kind of map their journey, learn from it, and also chat about how the current lockdown impacts their industry and how it's going to pivot. Today I'm in conversation with the extremely articulate and charming Saif Ali Khan. He's the son of two illustrious professionals, actor Sharmila Tagore and cricketer Mansoor Ali Khan. He's been in the business for close to 3 decades now. And in these 3 decades, he's managed to have an extremely fascinating filmography. Has a Padma Shri, a National Award, 6 Filmfare Awards, and a lot more tucked under his belt. So today is going to be a really special conversation with the man who's really has had an interesting choice of roles and stories and how he kind of explored the big screen and the OTT in the same kind of like lighthearted and curious manner that he's displayed. Thank you so much for taking the time out. This is really, really great. I hope you giggled a little bit at the password of joining the interview.
The what? Sorry?
Did you have to like punch in the password to join the meeting?
Yes, I think I did, but
okay.
but I could remember.
As long as it made you laugh.
Yes, it did make me laugh.
Amazing. Okay, so Saif, if I can, I'd like to start from the very start. With like an actor of a mum like Sharmila Tagore and a cricketer pop like Mansoor Ali Khan, I would imagine that the early exposure of your childhood to be extremely rich and diverse from like a cultural and a professional point of view. You've also said in the past that your childhood was much beyond just movies. How much of those early memories have kind of contributed to today's Saif?
Well, I think it's like the mind is like a computer in the sense that, all these things go into it and there's different visuals and different things that people say and advice that you're given by parents and, warnings or scoldings and all these things. And also things that you see and that you're told to do, like to read or nature and music. And, my mom used to have a lot of records and things like this. So there's all those things that go in there. And you kind of rebel against them, or at least I did, because you want to find your own way. Yeah. And but finally, when you are faced with, the kind of finiteness of life, or when you start thinking more seriously about, what you want to do because there's a limited amount of time here. And when more serious thoughts like that start settling, and then I think all these influences come into play. I mean, not just parents, but also school teachers and environment. And I think I've been really lucky to have had some really, really strong and very correct influences in my life. So it's just really a question of tuning into what they said, a little more.
No, that's so true. It's beautifully put. When I was reading about your filmography, it was really interesting because like the initial pattern almost displays a slightly more lighthearted approach to your choice of roles and movies that were taken on, as opposed to a slightly more like a really conscious and a strategic kind of like take on the choice of roles. The last decade or so has been really interesting. So from like Dil Chahta Hai, Hum Tum, Omkara, Kalakandi, Goga Gone, Being Cyrus, Lal Kaptan Tanaji, it's been a real mix of sorts. What changed and what kind of like dictates your choice of stories then versus now?
I used to remember what had changed, but I don't know if I can anymore. But um, the, it's pretty much what I was saying to you earlier, that all these things were there,
Hmm.
and the kind of ingredients on how to, make this recipe were always there. And the recipe is how you want to live your life. Um,
Hmm.
Whereas earlier, you weren't taking it seriously because it was too busy reacting or figuring out or rebelling or,
Hmm.
just not taking it seriously and just, having a good time. Even though I've been dismissing the 90s quite a lot recently in interviews, but it just suddenly struck me. Somebody asked me the other day about that time. But we worked really hard, even though it wasn't particularly good work or memorable.
Hmm.
But like I said, there were these songs and there was all this stuff. Anyway, the point is, I think films have changed and they've evolved a little bit, and you get a chance now. When you're on a set, I mean, we used to have really bad looking sets, and the philosophy was, you're the one getting paid, you're the star, don't worry about the set, just do what Mr. Bachchan would do, which is all very well. I mean, it's great. But luckily it's changed from that, where everybody's telling the story, the sets are telling the story, costumes, the whole thing's looking more like a holistic movie than ever. So there's a chance to act a little more in depth, and you get to really get into the craft of it, of how would this character express this emotion, blah blah blah. And Bollywood um, is quite a large umbrella, so there's very different types of minds and people here who come up with some really interesting ideas. So I think basically, in a nutshell, what changed was me just wanting to be a little more, to enjoy my life more, and which means to kind of take all these things that I'm interested in,
Yeah.
and for example, acting, and try and really get a lot of joy out of that by trying to be as clever or as creative as possible, so that when you come home, you're satisfied and you can get on with another aspect of your life.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I feel like it's almost like I felt like, say, the last 5 years, the kind of like movies you were also picking up and doing, that sense of like adventure and exploration, and just that kind of that deep conscious feeling of wanting to experiment and have fun in the process. I felt like that really came through. Um,
Right.
and was that fun for you to kind of
Absolutely.
explore?
No, I mean, incredible fun. In fact, it's given my life meaning, because it kind of, uh, if there's a balance to life, then that would be a creative job, and um, a family life, as
Hmm.
well as a social life with friends, and, and also a physical kind of aspect to life where,
Hmm.
you work out or you do something. And films is actually, quite a holistically balanced profession, in the sense that, if you do a certain kind of movie, you'll be required to do dance classes, which I'd done after a really long time recently, and everything hurt, but it felt so good. I started getting stronger in weird little muscles in the ankle, and
Yeah.
something in my knee, and I really started feeling fitter and more agile, and all thanks to the job. And then, of course, the mental thing of learning these lines and doing all that. But um, at the hinge of my life, I mean, it kind of revolves around this creative job, and just to go out there and really enjoy, staying up late and learning lines,
Hmm.
and creating something out of that, is fascinating. And
Hmm.
it's, thank God, because it would be really sad if it wasn't, if it was still
Yeah.
what it was I mean, in the 90s, none of us took it. I mean, people took it seriously,
Hmm.
but it was like an investment time that the people that put in the right amount of work then really benefit
Hmm.
today. But it wasn't necessarily clear that this is going to be rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like one of the movies from that time, actually, a big favorite of mine is Ye Dil Lagi, which
Yeah,
in fact was it was one of those successful movies, not only from like I mean, not critical acclaim, but just kind of like everyone loved it, but also from like an economic point of view. A movie that possibly made 15 crores at that point in time, but it also cost 2 crores. So
right.
from that perspective, and in those times, that's huge. today, before we kind of like dissect performances or let characters really just muddle around in the viewer's mind and like just kind of like see how you feel about it, like 2 days later, we're already dissecting weekend box office numbers. 100 crore is now considered fairly basic, but now for like an eco and finance grad like me, that number has very little value unless I know what the cost of the project was. So a 150 crore movie that did about 175 200 crores, possibly, that doesn't say really much. Everyone does kind of wait for commercial and editorial love, but how much does that matter to you? How much does the box office generation and the commercials matter to you? And I ask this with the context of my understanding of your brave choices in movie roles in the last few years.
Okay. So, I mean, it does matter, but it's not the only thing. So I think it's a balance. There should come a time where every film's got a certain kind of potential and it should live up to that. So you should not only be interested in the 100 crore movie, or you could be, I don't know. Just these are such fluid things. But the way my mind seems to have worked, and it wasn't a conscious thing, was that I'd quite like to be artistically engaged. And if I like the story and I think time is precious and you're going to spend time out of the house away from your family, which is something I'm not that excited about doing. It's different maybe for a single person or someone who doesn't want to be home. But it's got to engage you on more levels than just the potential of making money, at least the way I think. So, there's certain films that would be crowd pleasers or, what we call commercial movies in inverted commas. But I think that those would really, are a bit mind numbing after a while, because it's kind of like propagating a different kind of myth and, you like this aggressive dancer or something, I don't know, I mean, it's just not very, creative after a point for me, So it's that feeling that even if this is a little movie, provided it gets its love and it gets its appreciation, there's a great joy for me. But like you say, the budget should balance. So if we go to London, we get a rebate, we make a nice film called Jawani Janeman, and it makes it, a few crores. It'd be nice if it made a bit more, but nobody loses money. Some people make a little bit of money. I'm very happy in that space because the work is intelligent, it's quite sensitive, and I like how it's the whole vibe. So, I mean, not to compare budgets, but you can create a niche for yourself where you can operate on a frequency that you're comfortable on, where, this is the kind of vibe you want to give on screen. I mean, and I'd like to mix that once in a while with something more commercial that's more designed to be a crowd pleaser. Let's say something like a Tanaji and a Jawani Janeman. If you just look at the films I do, you'd realize they're self-explanatory in a sense.
Yeah, fair play. I want to talk to you a little bit about story.
Oh, sorry. No, hang on. So box office is very important, but there's a certain kind of story that you look at, and you should know what the potential of that story is, and you should know what your intention is. Why are you doing this film? Is it, and everyone says it's either box office or it's critical acclaim or it's both. Yeah. And there are films like that. And a person does films actually, honestly, for various reasons, not least of which could be money. But as long as you're clear why you're doing it. And I would have thought a nice mix would be the way to go. So box office is important, but it's not the only thing. You need to be engaged. You need to be part of a creative process where, like Vikram Motwani, working with him on Sacred Games.
Yeah.
It was so great because everyone was on top of their, game, and you felt the set was so real, and you have young actors, you've never seen before doing amazing parts, and everyone was like bringing amazing stuff to the screen. I'm still so proud of it if I see it.
Yeah.
And so you asked me, would you rather do that or 100 crore film? You scratch your head because this was hugely satisfying.
Yeah. That's true. It's a constant conundrum, no, between like the heart and the mind and the commercials of it and the creative aspect
You
of
know,
it.
I think variety is the elixir of life there, you
Yeah.
know, not just the spice, but in the sense that if for me,
Hmm.
so, you know, because commercial films, crowd pleasers are designed in a certain way. But if you do them a lot, I don't know whether that would become repetitive or slightly strange to be in
Hmm.
that kind of world. I don't know. But like I said, a nice mix for my head would work well. I think for most people,
Yeah.
most actors at least, would like a little bit of a. I mean, if you just don't think about it too much, it's just like being in different worlds,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know. And which world would you like to be in? When you get offered a script, you say, okay, you know, kind of done with these period war movies with armor and horses. You know, I'd like to do a
Yeah.
nice romantic comedy in Paris. You know, who
Can I
knows?
can I ask?
Yeah.
In
Sure.
hindsight, are there any roles or characters that in hindsight you felt like could have passed that? Or do you feel like you would have liked to have a greater say in how the story was developing, or
Yeah.
maybe like the portrayal of even like the LGBTQIA community in certain films? Would you have liked to have a greater say in that?
Yeah. But I mean, for example, Lal Kaptan, I thought was a really commercial kind of film, um, in many ways. But it was just, I think it was too big a project for just the director on his own to handle without action. And whereas you look at Tanaji,
Hmm.
and it was done so easily. But and the director knew, of course, what he wanted. But there were many heads of department that were contributing.
Yeah.
So it's not something you can do on your own. So Lal Kaptan, I feel, should have been like, you know, Blade, that Wesley Snipes, vampire hunter, Marvel comic superhero, you know, half dead, half alive, Twilight Zone kind of mystic swordsman. And they weren't even close, really. They tried to make it into a regular movie, whereas it
Hmm.
should have been, um, you know, larger than life in that sense, with
Yeah.
crazy, really interesting action. And then a lot of these directors, they don't like songs in films. And
Hmm.
then you know, so you say, okay, we're talking to an Indian audience here.
Yeah.
Who is our audience? That's one important thing to keep in mind all the time. And a lot of people try and change audience tastes. So if you're going to do all that, it should be done at a very low budget, um,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
audience tastes aren't going to change. You know, because people come to movies for various reasons. I think the
Hmm.
most common of which is a nice escape. So I don't think they're going to change
Hmm.
um, their tastes in movies until you change the socio-economic fabric of the country.
Hmm.
You know, and Amka Achar goes out of fashion, then, you know, at that point, maybe cinema will change.
Yeah, fair enough. You know, Saif, I feel like back in the day, I think that formula of storytelling was, in a way,
So
um,
sorry, I probably should have done Jolly LLB Part 2, which I was offered, but it got lost in negotiation, and Akshay Kumar did it. I should have, I regret that. And
yeah.
I should have done Farhad Khan's role in Kapoor and Sons. Um,
I remember reading that role came to you first.
yeah, I should have done it. It's very silly of me not to have. But you know, this is what it is, and life has to have. I mean, not regrets, but you have to say, "Oh God, I missed that one, and I made that one. That was great, and that was rubbish." And that's how it goes. I mean, it doesn't bear obsessing about. But I mean, it's just a point that I should have done those
Yeah. Yeah, but in
instead of
hindsight, no.
half of these. Yeah, that's okay.
You live and learn. Seth, like back in the day, this it was almost like a combination of topic bubbles that were employed. Boy, girl, one had to come from a rich family, the other from a poor family. Throw in one sinister uncle or aunt. Throw in another kind of like entrant of a character who was racy, flirty. Disrupted that like cutesy little love story. Some heartbreaks and epiphanies later. The original love unites, as opposed
Right.
to now, where there's a lot more layering in storytelling. We're exploring those multiple shades of gray. We're really kind of like trying to understand the different facets of human behavior, and stories are being told in a way like never before. What's your take on that? Is that also one of the big things that excite you in your current choice of roles?
Absolutely. I mean, because there's this whole, plethora of different parts, and people are getting in depth into the kind of, like, exactly what you're saying. It's making acting so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I mean, we've always been influenced by the West when it comes to movies. Um, and now in our time, we have maybe it's part of the nationalistic movement, um, an opportunity to tell our own stories in our own way, but using Western technique, and having to keep up because of things like Netflix. You watch Game of Thrones, and then if you see, let's say Tanaji again, I mean, it has to be roughly in the same zone. There's no point doing it.
Hmm.
And so technically, and in all these aspects, films are getting much, much, much better. Not that they could have gotten any worse than the 90s. So, I mean, they had to get better.
My guilty kind of like pleasure was actually Tea Time Cinema that used to roll on Z Cinema back in the day. So I can't say much about the 90s. I used to lap up that content for some reason.
No, but it was lapped up. And I guess the seeds of future, future greatness of cinema was sown also in the 90s. But it was a fairly barren time generally, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But in some ways great. It was so bad that it was good. I think that's the kind of like.
I mean, I think the music saved the decade.
Yeah.
Because and I think music companies in the 90s became massive, like Time and Tips and all these people. They were like huge. So they were like, okay, make whatever movie, just have 5 songs that run.
Yeah.
We're okay. So,
so true.
Yeah.
Saif, if I may, I'd like to talk about the OTT platform. The rise of that platform is almost like jaw-dropping. It's managed to kind of like disrupt the entertainment platform and the medium like no other. I mean, today it's more relevant and pivotal than probably even the small screen, the big screen. The Indian OTT market, it's estimated to be valued at
Sorry.
No, that's great. It reminds me that you're a reader. There has to be a reading light around. I appreciate that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, what about the OTT platform? It's growing massively.
I mean, it's growing at a disruptive pace. It's pegged at over 5,000 crores. India is considered as one of the top 10 markets for the entire space. For the longest time, if a kind of like tier one layer one actor made this shift from the big screen to the OTT space, it was almost seen like the reversal of growth. But you not being shy of taking up the kind of like explored route, and you've never been shy of taking the unconventional route. There you came along as Sartaj Singh in Sacred Games. And then boom, boom, boom. It was one of the most loved kind of like seasons, if I may so, the first season more than the second. What interested you about the OTT space at a point in time where most people were hesitant in exploring that?
I think the thing there is intention is one of the most important things to get right in life. And people always know what your intention is, which is, a kind of a secret key to good acting also. Like, what are you trying to say? People can, if you're listening carefully, you can hear intention everywhere. And people take offense, and you can be very polite, but if your intention's not right, you can cause great offense. So if the intention is to do good work, it cannot, in my head, be a step down. You see, because normally when people make a shift, and they do something like, for example, I'm saying television, and they get paid more, that could be a shift that's happening because they need the money, they want the money, they need a job, I don't know. But it's the intention is not to create art, so you get nailed for that in a way sometimes. Whereas something like this, because it was clear that, listen, it's Netflix, they're coming to India, they're doing their first original, so we're following it, something like Narcos. So it's absolute no-brainer that, in fact, it's a great compliment that they would want you. So it's not that you're thinking, oh, should I? And then it depends who your idols are. Like, I mean, things change. When I was a kid, I used to look up to Johnny Depp because I thought he was a really good looking actor who could have done so many commercial films, but he mixed it up a lot and did, films that often negated his own charm, things like Edward Scissorhands and things like this,
Yeah,
where
so true.
he could have played pretty boys all his life. But he didn't want to do that, which was cool.
Yeah.
So that was a path that I saw. And there was also like someone like Tom Hardy, who has his own web show, is a villain in a film, is a hero of another movie. And I think that's the kind of actor to be in my head today, where it's whatever you want, like, and you have to know who you are. You're not known only as an actor. You're a person who is this person, living here, doing his thing. And if something grabs you, you'll go out and do it. And you'll go out and do it really well. And then you'll come back home and you don't want to get involved in any other rat race, or you don't want to discuss really anything beyond a point. Somebody gives you some money, you go and do a job. You come home and you go and rent a house in Provence and go and hang out and swim with the kid for, a couple of weeks and eat some nice food and come back and look for another job. I mean, it's that simple, really.
That's amazing. It does
Yeah.
sound amazing. But in some ways, it also kind of like shows this consistency in your ways of working or your MO. Like I started the interview with kind of talking about your filmography and the graph, and there's a sense of like exploration and discovery and a little bit of lightheartedness when you approach your choice of roles. And it's so interesting that, say, like you're closing in like 3 decades in the business and you're approaching work with kind of like the same core values, so to speak.
No, with more passion and with more care. I worked with an actor recently, and I thought, I didn't know what he was saying, but he was a sweet chap. He was playing a small part in the film I was doing, and he said, I did some 10 takes or something. And he said, it's amazing how you're still so interested and passionate. And I said, well, is there any other way? And I realized that maybe some people aren't that interested, at least, around him or whatever. I don't know. Maybe success comes. Abba used to say this about cricketers, that sometimes, they're just too successful too easily. So they don't really think about it so much. Whereas I've had to think about it quite a lot. And I find it fascinating. And I think to enjoy life, you have to commit and you've got to get into things and be good at them and really, and it's a good age that I'm at. I mean, I'm 49 and I'm thinking, I often think about, death and getting old and what that'll feel like. And then I feel better when I see, my mother looking fit and enjoying life and traveling and, having a drink and eating dinner. And so I said, okay, well, as long as I can do all that. But the point is, there's a poetic side that sees an end to all this as well. So you got to make things count or not, or make, a completely indolent existence count, as long, whatever you want. But the point is just be conscious that time is running out.
Yeah.
So, and also, I mean, after 30 years of doing it, if you finally getting a grasp on how to do it, slightly decently, so that makes it much more fun as well, that you actually getting a little control over the medium, finally. And you're realizing things that by doing very little, you can achieve a lot. So that's a good zone to kind of be in. It's great fun. This lockdown, I'm missing, I think, only 2 things. I think I'm missing traveling to Europe, really. I'm missing Patodi, but I'm missing acting, because I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm not really missing much else.
Yeah, but speaking of the pandemic and the lockdown, it's kind of like left most industries on like the zero operation, paused revenue kind of format. In the times of physical and social distancing, how do you imagine your industry to pivot? Are you going to see different departments of the trade kind of scrunch down? Are scenes going to be written differently where there are lesser people and technicians in the room? No dream sequence in Europe? That bottleneck of films that were meant to release, how's that going to What's
I
the
mean,
kind of like, how is it going to impact the industry?
there's no answers to these questions
Yeah.
at the moment. All of these things, nobody, I mean, there's a myriad dystopian images that come to mind of a potential film shooting unit where, everyone's scanned and everyone's temperatures on the phone, and, and then, but the makeup guy doing makeup on you, I mean, how's he supposed to not breathe on you? Okay, he wears a mask and everyone wears suits, and actors are the only people not wearing these suits. I mean, it's completely impractical. And it's to expect somebody to, you have to be a really good actor to kind of just look calm. You'll be like, oh God, I'm going to die.
Yeah.
But basically, you will not be able to shoot until everyone's comfortable, and because it's a mass gathering. It's like there's no difference between shooting a film or having, a large political rally as far as people getting together goes, or having a big namaz, or
I'd
having
imagine that the objective be different though.
No, but it's not about the objective. It's about how many people are breathing on each other.
Yeah, of course.
The germs are not bothered about the objective. They just say, aha, lovely film shooting. This is class. This is exactly what we want.
Australia is opening up in a week or two, if I remember reading, because their show Neighbours, they're going to get back into shoot mode in about a week, 10 days. So everyone's kind of like looking at them also to see what are the green touch points.
But again, I mean, if you've got a crew and a cast that's willing to isolate themselves, and I assume that's what's going to happen. If they start shooting, they'll all go and live somewhere, and they'll all shoot somewhere, so that everyone involved. You can't be coming home, and meeting a whole bunch of other people, then going out to lunch with a whole bunch of other people.
Yeah,
I don't think you can right now. There's already slightly disturbing images coming in of doctors saying that there's some bodies lying around in the hospital, nobody's moving them because they don't want to touch anyone who's got COVID-19. And so, I mean, it's still what happened in Italy and Iran, and, is not happened yet. But maybe that's because we've been quite careful. But I understand. I mean, it's a nightmare for everyone, for all of us. I mean, how I don't know how the economy is going to survive and how people are going to survive. And a lot of them will say, give us a chance and we'd rather risk, 2% mortality, we'll take it,
Is there a lot of conversation around, because I mean, the industry is yes about the actors and the directors and the producers and the writers and all of that, but it's also the the guys in the production team and the ones who kind of like produce your sets and the hair and makeup and the spot boys. For them, paused operations is not a luxury or like time to reflect at home. It's literally no food on the plate.
Absolutely.
So, is there any conversation within the industry about how can one help them at this stage?
Of course there is. Of course there is. There's all kinds of drives and initiatives being set up, and I mean, India anyway, the haves have to take care of the have-nots, and we've got to make sure that there's some kind of equalizing. You can't only count on the government to do it. You have to, all the very privileged kind of individuals should share a bit of their wealth, to put it bluntly. And so we'll continue to do that. I mean, there's been all these funds, the CM and PM, and I know Neswadia had set something up, the film industry. There's a couple of things being set up. So the daily workers, you try. So, I mean, hopefully people will organize these things and continue to. I know they are organizing them, but they'll continue to organize them. But it's a nightmare. And it's not the daily wage workers, the assistant directors, people who come in from different towns, just they depend on work every day. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to eat, and they're not going to be able to rent their apartments. And in that kind of, it's going to be an apocalypse. I mean, it's going to destroy the economy completely. So, I mean, it's like being at war. It really is. I've said that from the first day. And we're all fighting it actively. And however, and there's two things that can happen. Either we'll be called on suddenly to go out there and risk it. Or, we'll win it by sitting at home and trying to stay, out of hospital. Really, that's the objective of staying home. So I don't know. I don't know. I guess we'll have to. I mean, Hari, my house help, reads the news every day,
Yeah.
and we have a discussion. And he's saying I think it's going to take a while. And halka phulka khulta rahega, but basically it's shut down till we find a cure.
Looks like he's kind of summarized it quite aptly.
I think I wouldn't change a word.
Yeah. Yeah. Saif, I'm going to ask you a couple of quick questions before we ask a round of questions that some viewers have sent in for you, if you have the time, please.
Sure.
One is, I want to talk to you about how this conversation actually all started off, and what the medium of this conversation could be. And it was actually a day later where I realized that, oh, wait, how are we going to do this? Because you're not on social media. Okay, cool. Can we do this on Zoom? I find this so refreshing and quite remarkable for someone in your kind of like business not to have any presence of social media. For me, it's almost like my extension. It's a big part of my job, and my phone and my laptop are extensions of my hand. It's obnoxious. But tell me, does absence on any kind of digital platform impact your work, your movies, marketing plans, presence, relevance? Does it have a factor in it?
I don't know. I don't know actually, and I don't think so. But I'm sure there'd be a factor in it. Maybe someone would pay me a bit more if I could advertise something on Instagram, or if I had 5 million followers or 20, then it would help publicize things that I want to publicize.
Yeah.
Among those people.
Well, I would imagine that in a span of like night to day, you'd see that kind of.
But I'm saying, I think by the time a production publicity machine gets done with a movie, I think everyone pretty much knows it's releasing. And if I just look at myself, I don't really need to get involved in an actor's Instagram profile to decide whether I want to watch an upcoming movie or not. And also, it depends on from person to person. I mean, some people enjoy sharing that kind of thing. I don't feel, I feel I will really start working hard to kind of produce content to impress the viewer if I was on Instagram. And I think that'll turn me into some kind of a different person. I'll start commercializing almost every aspect of my life, and I'll be shooting Taimur, and I'd be taking pictures of I don't know what, maybe my shoes, I don't know. I'd be kind of just taking pictures of things and putting them up with a clever little caption. And I mean, that's great, but I'll really take away from all the, I mean, when am I going to read or play the guitar or, do other things that I enjoy doing?
Do you value your privacy a lot more than probably?
No, not really. I mean, yes and no. I mean, I think privacy is a constantly evolving moment. It's not a constant thing. I mean, like I could share a picture of my bedroom today with you, and I'm not feeling particularly, conservative about that. Or my house, or someone can do it. But tomorrow I might not feel like it. So I could feel private tomorrow, but I'm not feeling private today. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not that, it's a like a tenant of mine that I will not, because I don't like to share. It's not some outdated thought. I'd love to share. You can watch me cook. You can come into I'd actually be really good on Instagram. So I think it's two things. I think, first of all, I don't want to do things that everyone else is doing. I think it's an instinct where someone's like, hey, get on Instagram. Why? Everyone's on it. Okay, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
That's just my instinctive response. It's just the way I've been brought up, really. And I don't want to impress people. I don't know. I just want to act. And I love my life. I'm not looking for any fulfillment from anything. I've fulfilled enough. So I don't know. I might do it, I might do it.
I mean, many people also view that platform more as expression and not necessarily kind of like catering to or wanting to impress the other person. I feel there's a different school of thought about like certain people also use those platforms to probably use it for exactly why it started, was to share. Whether that's an opinion or a picture or a tip or actually nothing at all. I wonder if like that your sense of discovery, which is obviously quite specific to your core. I wonder if like that could be another medium of expression and exploration and discovery.
No, I've got so much. If you go through my phone pictures, it's perfect for Instagram. It's like, because I love the idea of sharing. I
Yeah.
do love the idea of sharing, but I think I just resisted it because it's what everyone else is doing. And I thought, oh, I don't want to be like part of the, bhed chal.
Right.
But I might well do it because also I quite like the idea of being, and some kind of a influencer or basically getting some free shit on the net. Yeah, I love that. So I say, hey, come go on a holiday. I want to get paid more. Make some pocket money extra
Yeah.
on Insta. Say do 3 posts and we'll give you loads of money.
Well,
That'll be
knowing
great.
you, I would imagine that would not even be like the secondary objective. It might not be in the tertiary. It'd come in the 11 to 20. But I feel like just kind of sometimes it's interesting to probably know a little bit more and kind of like break down those multiple gates between
No, but
someone
you're
you
absolutely
admire and
right.
someone who wants to consume.
No, you're absolutely right. I completely agree, And like I said, it's not a principle. In fact, I might get on it. I might really get on it because I think somewhere we were brought up with a slightly, even though it's ages and ages ago, a kind of a Victorian idea of privacy.
Yeah.
And this generation and Instagram has destroyed that, which is great because actually, if you don't share, nobody knows you. And if they don't know you, different conceptions of you. And it's better to have the reality of who you are out there. And also, again, confronting mortality is better to share than to have not been known because people will forget also tomorrow.
I mean, also because maybe like now today's consumer, as opposed to the exclusivity of an artist, now we look for how
Yes,
relatable an artist is.
Absolutely.
So instead of like a marketing team spinning a story and feeding it to me through mainstream media, I'd rather just get that from an authentic account of the artist.
Perfect. Exactly. I agree. I might get on it.
Okay, great. I look forward. I'm going to be your first follower.
All right. Done.
Great. Saif, like your mom, your sister, your wife, now your daughter is an actor too. She's part of the profession. What's that parent to kid career conversation like?
Well, I mean, Sarah and I have some conversations, and suddenly I realized that she's just probably not a kid anymore. She's, in her mid-20s. So she's quite grown up and she's smart, and we talk about whatever. But it's more of an adult thing. We've always had a very small, kind of strange age gap because I think I was about 24 when Sarah was born, which is quite young. So it's partially elder brother and it's partially father, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't get as judgy with her as I would with, Ibrahim or Temul.
Right.
So, I mean, if I'm having if I'm doing something, then she probably should be allowed to do it as well, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we talk about everything, and we have these chats.
Does protective parent ever kind of like jump into the ring?
Well, there's never been a real situation where something like that's come up,
Right.
I mean, she's never, but it would come up. I mean, of course it would be if she said, oh, this is what's happened. And but she's not really like that. But, if she needed some help or if she was concerned, a couple of 2-3 times in life she has, and it has brought out a very sympathetic reaction from me where I would want her to not be distressed. So, you do whatever it takes to kind of ensure that. So obviously, I mean, these are things that you don't have any control about. I mean, your children will just bring certain reactions out of you, whether you like it or not.
Oh, that's amazing. So, Saif, because this couldn't be a live interview, and what happens is that towards the end, we host this Q&A segment where all our viewers kind of pop in questions. So we actually ran a quick story before saying, I'm going to have this interview with you. If you have a question for him, I'm going to ask it. So if you have like a couple of quick minutes, can I ask you those questions? There were some really good ones that came in about, what if like this person's character didn't pass away, would you and Preeti be together in movies? But I'm going to condense down and get you the better questions that came in.
Okay.
Going by the reading light, that the lamp that we just took off. Is there a book that you would recommend to read? This was probably the most asked question that came in.
I mean, that's like saying, would you recommend a dish to eat, or would you recommend a place to go? I mean, how do I answer that question? I don't know. Depends what you like, and it depends. I mean, the thing is, everything's there, and it's all there. So I mean, you can choose. It's like what I love about a book is there's a conversational style, there's a writing style that good authors have, and from the descriptions of things, but there's also their way of words, and there's a personality that comes through, and a unique personality in the choices that they make and how they describe things. Some authors have massively long sentences. I just read something very nice where an author said that a whole thought should be contained in a sentence with the right punctuation, so it can go on. And some of Proust's sentences were so long that someone said if you cut them out of a book, you could wrap them around a wine bottle 7 times. One sentence, 7 times around a wine bottle. And he said no, because that's the length of the thought. And the whole thought needs to be put in one sentence, which I thought was fascinating. So, I mean, there's no one book to recommend.
Maybe one that you read in the last, say, like 30.
Okay, I think my favorite short story would be Alexander Pushkin's The Queen of Spades, which is about magic and gambling and deception and a bit of a ghost story also. The Russians, I think, are my favorite storytellers, and Tolstoy and Pushkin would be my favorites, absolutely. So any short story by Tolstoy, maybe the Kreutzer Sonata by Tolstoy and the Queen of Spades by Pushkin. So choose between those two.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for the weekend reading. One change you'd like to see in your industry and fraternity?
Well, I don't want to say anything negative about it, but if you ask me that, I think there's sometimes so many people on a set that not everyone is extremely conscious of the creative process that the actor is going through. So I'd like everyone to be on that page and pin drop silence and, a little more awareness of what's going on. And that'll probably get me in lots of trouble with my own fraternity. But yeah, like sometimes you got a lot of workers and people milling around. In the older days, a few years ago, the lightmen were really conscious and quiet. And if you gave a good shot, they'd clap for you. And that was the ultimate compliment to an actor, that the lightmen clap, because they're watching this, this stuff day in, day out. And if something touches them, that means it's really out of the ordinary. And you don't see that anymore because everyone's too busy maybe doing their own jobs, but also in their own heads on the phone or whatever. Yeah. So a little more focus at what we're doing.
All right. Okay. Last day on Earth, and you could watch only one movie. Which one would it be? It's another tough one.
Yeah, it's very, very hard to say.
Maybe, okay, how about I narrow it down? One movie or a role of yours that you'd like to see again?
God. I don't know if it certainly wouldn't be one of mine if it was the last day. Though I think I'd always be quite proud of Tanaji.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I'd say Tanaji of mine because it was fun. But as a movie, I'd say maybe a Clint Eastwood Western, I don't know. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or something. I don't know. Or The Godfather. Maybe The Godfather.
Yeah, that's a great choice. A movie role you wish you wouldn't have played in hindsight?
I mean, it's never really mattered that much. I mean, there's always something. But in hindsight, if I hadn't done Lal Kaptan and I've done something else instead, I probably had a more. No, I can't say that because I really enjoyed the behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Hanging out in
yeah.
Rajasthan
You
was
picked
great.
something else, not that.
Yeah. So I really can't think. I'm sure there's been some bad movies. It's been a while though, so I can't remember. I don't regret anything I've done.
Good.
Some Oscar Wilde, I'm reading that at night, said, at the end of it all, the only things you won't regret are your mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. Last two questions. One actually came in from me. And I guess I'm just going to allow that if you don't mind. So,
Sure.
a big part of my work is kind of like working on multiple projects all at the same time. And then I'm so heavily invested in one that towards the end of it, I actually just kind of like forget it completely. I need blank space before I get into the next one. So I actually kind of like completely disengage from the last piece of work. And I read somewhere that a lot of artists and actors also employ that technique. And I know a lot of actors who've actually not watched a lot of their movies at at completion stage. Is that something you do too, or have you watched all your performances?
There's a lot that comes into it. There's a lot of pressure in India from the marketing teams to start building stories about how everyone was watching the trial and how everyone's loving the movie and how everything's, so you can't really afford to have, I mean, again, I think it was Johnny Depp who said that I don't want to see the film once I've finished acting because it's none of my business really what they do with it, because sometimes these guys can edit it in various ways and it depends how important you are to the role. So a lot of actors might say, listen, I enjoy the process of acting, I don't enjoy the process of seeing what you guys did with it, so I don't really want to watch it after a point. But most of the times I do watch the finished product, and it's a very exciting moment where it all comes together, where everyone's worked so hard and the background music comes in and you suddenly realize that which is what my complaint was earlier, that everyone should be aware of that right from the start so we can have, a little more discipline. But yeah, I mean, I love to watch. Is that the question?
Yeah.
I love watching the movie. The finished product is the whole thing. So when you read the script, you see it a certain way. And then the whole thing is working to get it there.
Yeah.
And then when you watch it, it's really nice if it is there. So it's like, it's a fantastic job in that sense. I love every aspect of it, especially the end bit when you finally watch it.
Yeah. Okay. Fair play. That's quite good, actually. Maybe a good piece of advice for me. Last question that came in from one of our readers was that a piece of advice that you received in your early days that you hold quite close to your heart, and that you would want to give on to anyone who's listening to this interview.
Acting advice.
It could be about life, about acting, your craft, anything.
Okay. So my mother said, treat the camera like a woman that you would like to impress, which means that everything you're doing is for her, but not necessarily very obviously. So you will be noticed even if you are like, a lot of women will say, well, who's that very interesting chap at the back who didn't say much? You'll be seen. You don't have to make, often the people who make too much noise, become quickly disinteresting or uninteresting. So, just keep that in mind. Try and be, that's something she said. Treat the camera like a lady you're trying to impress.
It's almost like best foot forward.
In whatever way,
Yeah.
I mean, kind of best way. I mean, another piece of advice was from the great Mahesh Bhatt, who said, actually it was Suraj Bharjat. Mahesh Bhatt said, please forget about acting and just try and pitch your performance at your 5-year-old kid. If they get it and they like it, it's good enough for me. That was nice. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
And Suraj Bharjat said, when in doubt, don't do anything. Just
What does that mean?
let the background music take over. Just give it a gap. The background music will handle it, and
Wow.
just think the right thing, and you'll get through it. So if you have a crisis, like when you really don't know what to do, and
Yeah.
your relative is lying dead on the funeral pyre, just look at her.
That could actually explain a bunch of scenes from.
Yeah,
I love his movies, so that could explain a bunch of scenes from his productions. No.
it might, yes.
Yeah.
Except with probably a smile as well.
Right.
Probably not at the funeral pyre, but
No.
we have to smile a lot in
Yeah.
but yeah, no, but he
Downward gaze and smile. That was a good look in all his
a
movies.
lot, if you see, actually, since I had the privilege of working with him, that Salman Khan's performances in his films are very, very like direct copies in a way of Suraj Bajate. He pioneers that pose. It's his pose, that
Oh,
lovely, that,
really?
that angelic smile and that head tilt and everything. I believe so. I could be wrong, but I think he says, I I I, I think I heard this from Salman, that I
Wow.
just do what Suraj said. Um,
Quite
I think,
literally the director's actor then.
yeah, we all. I mean, he
No, this is great. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the
pleasure.
time out. I had such a great, I had a hoot having this conversation.
Good.
And
I'm glad.
I hope
I
you have
hope
a
it
really
was.
good weekend.
Thank you very much. You too. Where are you, by the way?
I am based out of New Delhi.
So everyone's locked down there.
Yep,
No.
fully, completely.
Oh, bloody hell. Well, let me know how it goes, and we chat again some other time.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, see
Thanks so
you in
much.
the real world at
In
some
the
point.
real world, hopefully.
All right, my dear. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thank you.